So the wetland is basically right next to his house. And then it goes out back of his house, the whole back of his house is part of the wetland.
But that in back of his house, are you talking here? Or are you
Yeah,
talking
Yeah,
here?
this is, the wetland is here and here.
Mhm.
So they're in the wetland.
Well, they knew that.
Right,
Okay.
but
That was,
I think it's just,
Okay.
USC, no, it's,
Good.
We'll see.
what the hell's the other
oh,
one?
this is good. Thank you, John.
HDMI.
You need an HDMI cable?
We are without the big screen behind me tonight, so I'm going to turn my laptop around so everybody can see. So if you're going to put pictures or anything up, we're going to have limited view. We do have two laptops here that we can share.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it around so everybody can see, and then we're going to start with the meeting right now.
Hello, everyone.
You want to come along
Actually,
here?
we shipped one. We can all see.
Yeah. Our connection is Village of Canton guest. Oh, but there is a password. And I don't know it because it's saved to my computer. They gave it to me when I got here.
Okay. All right, we had to shift around a little bit here. Everybody get the minutes?
I did.
Any,
Put it just on speaker B, so it's easier to see. Put it on speaker B.
are we on speaker?
No, just put it on speaker B, put view over
Oh,
there. Then you just do speaker view. There we go. There.
okay. Okay, so motion to approve the minutes,
So moved.
second?
Yes.
All in favor? I
Aye. Well done, Don.
captured a lot.
Yes.
Okay, so the county has weighed in. So you guys know, Jim and Pam Rose are here, the neighbors of your property or your development.
Hello. I did not know. I was not aware of that. Nice to meet you. I actually tried to look up Mr. Rose's number today. I saw the only number that came up was for the auto body shop. I did not end up leaving a message, but I do wish to speak to you at some point if I can get your number somehow.
He can be found at the body shop once in a while.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll call through there if that's appropriate.
Is that fine, Jim?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine, yeah.
All right. Thank you. Yes, we are in receipt of those county comments. Thank you for allowing us to meet with you again. I do want to just start by saying I appreciate the quick turnaround to the county of the site plans. I think unfortunately that was our first pass at the site plan that went to the county. So I would appreciate the opportunity to address their comments and hopefully come to some resolution that was acceptable to the town and the neighboring properties for this project.
Okay, I think the best way to approach this for tonight is for you to go down the list one by one, and then we'll comment on them as we go, rather than wait till the end.
Sure, absolutely. If you don't mind, I'll share our response letter on my screen, or actually, you know what? It's all text anyway. It's not really going to be helpful. On this.
Yeah, we all have it.
Okay. So the first comment is the largest that I'd like to address because through this being the first iteration of the site plan, not having all of the survey information back, Mr. and Mrs. Rose, I apologize that road was shown on your property. That was not our intent. We intended on having it entirely in the right of way until it got to our property to go up north on the solar array area. So through getting the survey information back and implemented into the CAD file, that road is actually that we're showing going north to south is on the parcel owned by Mr. Brewer, where we lease the land for the solar array currently. So I wanted to start with that. Our intent is to stay entirely within the existing right of way, with the bulk of that access road being contained within the project parcel, which is owned by Mr. Brewer.
Okay,
Do you have a copy of that?
is that I spoke with Jim briefly this afternoon, just for my own reference. Jim, do you want to talk about that? Is that deeded to anybody, that right away?
It's our understanding it goes for the property.
Goes with the Brewer property?
No. The right of way is for the Brewer property, correct? But the right of way is on our property.
Okay,
And it's only for ingress and egress.
I guess what we need to be certain of, because of the county's comments, is we need to make sure that that's a deeded right of way that crosses the Roses property to that Brewer lot.
Understood, and I apologize if I misspoke before. I understand that it's your property. It was our intent to stay, that it's our understanding there's an existing right of way for ingress and egress to Mr. Brewer's parcel. So that's what we would intend to use to access that parcel. It would not be our intent to propose any equipment within that right of way. That would be on Mr. Brewer's property.
I don't know how you're gonna do that, because the road now that goes to the, right to the right of the wetland is on Jim's land and is bordered by a cooperative extension land.
We talked about cooperative extension owning it last.
Yes, we said the driveway is owned by the Cornell Cooperative Extension. That's what we had in our minute.
They own part of
They own part of it, Pam.
Okay, but I think what he is saying, John, is that there is a deeded right of way, that road is a deeded right of way to the Brewer property. Is that?
That's our understanding. I do want to qualify that by saying that our survey team is still working on mapping that on the Alta survey. There's a lot of deed references and historic deeds that they're working through to map that. But it is our understanding that there is an existing right of way or access to that parcel to avoid it being a landlocked parcel for ingress and egress.
I guess I'd like to see the deed.
Well, there was a
before we-
road. It was the Janes Road that was abandoned. And Don Chambers, who's the county road superintendent, weighed in on that. And he had a lot to say about abandoned roads and rules. And looking at my notes, I didn't write anything down about that. Something about, I don't know. I don't remember what he said. But it was an issue. It was talked about a lot at the county planning board level, the road, that it was, I got from it that it was murky. The handshakes and things like that.
So that could, some of the reason behind the length of time it's taking the surveyor to map this on an Alta survey. I know that there's a lot of deed references that to go through, some of which are, at least on the copy of the title report we have, are of poor quality and hard to interpret. So that is something we plan to demonstrate, is that existing access is there from Mead Road to Mr. Brewer's parcel.
Okay, so here's where we are at with this. So the procedure, if you've not been through the county planning board before, is if they send back a denial or disapproval, it requires a majority plus one vote from this board to override any of their comments. So we're really going to need to see that before we can vote on that particular part.
Understood. And I would want to make sure that we have that clear access defined as well. It's our understanding that's always been the case for Mr. Brewer to access his property. But I want to make sure that we're demonstrating that to the town prior to an approval as well.
Yeah, the part of the problem stems
Utilities?
from, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, that it was a Burwell property before that defaulted to the Farm Credit Bureau. Mr. Brewer bought it from Credit Bureau.
Yes.
I don't know that he knows for sure that he's got deeded access or can prove it, obviously. If he could prove it, then you'd have it in your hands at this point.
Deeded access, I mean, to and from, how do they get the power in and out, and what does that do to our our driveway basically in our yard.
So within the right of way, our intent would be to extend the existing three-phase service that stops at the auto body shop with a few poles to get into our property for the interconnect equipment to be located.
So those poles would be on our property.
Within the right of way, if that was, that's our understanding that that would be allowed. But yes, that's what's proposed. And I'd like to ask another question too, because I was trying to reach out to Mr. and Mrs. Rose. Would you be willing to discuss an easement even in addition to what may be there that we understand to be there, to actually outline clearly pole locations? Would you, that's something you'd be willing to discuss on the southern boundary of your parcel?
Well, there's a lot of things that need to be discussed prior to that. I mean, there's just, as all the county had concerns, or our concerns, everything about this project seems to be miscued. Or I'm not sure, I guess, what verbiage to use, but I'm kind of concerned how this plan went forward with all this, with the road being on our property, the power's not what the plan says, that the poles are going to be on our property connected to the three-phase. There's just a lot to digest here and get ironed out.
And that no one had any contact with us whatsoever, that we had to find out through seeing surveyors or other communication. And we paid to put those poles in. We pay to maintain the driveway, and we upkeep the lawn, which the lawn has no poles on it. So you're going to be adding poles and lines on our property. And that's not only that, then we've got the solar farm basically wrapped around our property as well. So there are many concerns. Not that we're against solar, because we totally are not, but there's a right and wrong way to handle things in my opinion.
And to also for the right of way, it would be if it does read just ingress and egress, it doesn't specify poles or
Right.
power lines.
Exactly.
So I think that somebody is going to have to determine what is the use for that right of way.
I think first we need to determine that there actually is one.
Exactly.
Yeah, we need to keep it.
The rest of it is new.
And it's liable to be old enough that it wouldn't reference something like that, but you know, at that point, it would then be, we need to see that first, I think. I think that's the most important thing. Is it there?
And in that,
Is it there legally, not just wink, wink, handshake, you know?
Yep. So first, I just like to, again, to apologize to the Roses about that presentation or how you came about that, to find out about that project or the equipment that was located on your property, because that was not our intent to locate it on there. I realize that's what's on the plan. I can't take that back at this point other than apologize, and would like to say that we would like the opportunity to present our updated plan that avoids any equipment on your property and the demonstrate the access or work with you to develop a more clearly defined access for those pole locations. And I know that you made a comment about the array surrounding the parcel or your parcel. Would like to present the idea of some screening around that property. I'm not sure if that can be effectively done in this meeting, but I would like the opportunity to speak with you offline potentially and work through some of your concerns and see if we can address them.
Any other questions or comments on the first point?
so just to summarize, we're gonna be looking at the deed. If that land is deeded or not, and have something more concrete than just the proposal.
Yes.
That's correct? Okay.
Okay, number 2. So no attempt was made by the applicant to avoid development on the delineated wetland identified as wetland B on the site plan. I do believe we've talked about that at the last meeting.
We did.
You did.
Yeah, on that, I'd just like to speak to it. I don't think it's necessarily fair to say there was no attempt made to avoid the development on the wetland. We looked at that wetland as it relates to the other areas on the site. There's nothing preventing us from proposing the use of this on a wetland that's under the Army Corps of Engineers jurisdiction. And it was done so to capture the full capacity approved by National Grid, but also to lessen the required clearing on other parts of the property, which your solar law actually outlines that we should consider offsetting any of the clearing done on the rest of the property. So we really did try to minimize the clearing. And in order to do that and take advantage of the areas that were already cleared, we had to install over the wetland area.
Right here.
So I know you say that the Army Corps of Engineers doesn't have a problem with putting solar racks in a wetland because they're pinned in such a way that's not harmful to the environment. Is that correct?
That's correct. And Bill, would you be able to elaborate on that?
So, well, that's what you said last time when you explained it. In terms of getting a release from the Army Corps of Engineers. So are we going to see that release?
Well, I'm sorry. The way that the Corps views that, it's more that it's just not a regulated activity. So there would be no need to go for a permit. Is there something that you need to see in terms of guidance in that direction? Because we would not be seeking a permit for them because it's an unregulated activity.
Well, I don't know enough about wetlands to ask you even a decent question about that.
We can definitely provide some kind of, from my ecology team who works with the Army Corps, quite frequently. We can provide some kind of correspondence or, guidance documents that kind of lay out, what the Army Corps permits in terms of a solar arrays. We can definitely provide, I guess, more assurance in terms of that comment.
So what's that wetland going to look like when you take all the machines through that and put the racks in?
Right.
It's a
Mike's had a pretty good examples of how his particular company installs these arrays, the types of measures that they use to make sure there's not a lot of rutting or disturbance to the soil. There's really, minimal impact the way that these arrays are installed.
So does that mean you put like a plank road down? Something
That
like that?
depends on that can be done for sure. If it is a very wet, boggy, marshy area, you can put kind of those those ballasts down. You can use high flotation tires. There's definitely a lot of prescriptions in the stormwater prevention plan that lays out kind of what needs to be done in terms of making sure that the underlying soils aren't disturbed. And if they are indeed compacted, they have to be decompacted as part of the project.
Do you think that you could get something from the Army Corps that actually says that they don't regulate that?
I can definitely see what we can provide. It's sometimes it's tough to get an agency to say what they don't do, but we'll definitely follow up on that point and make sure we get you something concrete.
Yeah,
Okay.
you said in the minutes that it was an allowed activity by the Army Corps of Engineers. You stated that specifically in the minutes, so I'd like to see that verification.
Sure.
We
And
wonder
if
if
I
we
can
couldn't also-
clarify that point, and instead of saying it's an allowed activity, I would rephrase that to say that is an unregulated activity, which I think is a little different.
No,
I can double check the recording.
well, it's all right.
Clarify,
I'm
but
either
putting-
way. I'm
No,
putting
You
the
would just
new-
show the regulations that allow that, what
Yeah.
you're talking about, that would be phenomenal.
And I'll also say from a construction standpoint, we'd be pretty strategic about that area. We wouldn't necessarily want to have to use those timber mats or other mattings. And we would do so by making sure the conditions allowed us to use either low pressure tires or other equipment like that to use regular construction equipment and install in that area when the conditions allowed. So I would want to be more strategic about that specific area when we did the installation, so we would avoid damage to that area.
So I'm going to ask Jim if he'd tell us about that wetland. Would you do that?
What's that?
Would you tell us about that wetland? Like what's the usual condition of that wetland?
this is a very rare year, as everyone knows, the water table's way down. My pond in the backyard that's 20 feet deep is down about 8 feet right now. And it's not coming back anytime fast. But so usually that whole area is just wet. I mean, it hasn't been farmed in the last 3 owners, just because it's so wet. You drive a tractor in there and you're stuck. I mean, there's cattails growing up. You talk about the Army Corps of Engineers. What about the DEC? I mean, there's cattails everywhere. I volunteer a lot of time on the St. Lawrence County Snowmobile Association, and we trimming trails and stuff, and they're very adamant, the DEC, about cutting cattails in any wet area.
So I guess we'd like to see the Army Corps of Engineers that this is an allowed activity or within the regulation, and then how you plan to protect that wetland from any kind of abuse.
I don't know. I guess somebody would have to check. I don't think the DEC trumps the federal wetlands.
Well,
Like-
the DEC does have a different standard of care when it comes to wetlands, and for wetlands that are under their jurisdiction, but this one would not be.
So it's the Army Corps of Engineers. Okay.
Yeah, our understanding was that it was entirely under their jurisdiction. Is that what you're confirming, Bill?
Yes.
Once
Okay.
constructed, though, I did want to add that that would essentially remain undisturbed with the exception of the panels being in there. Post-construction, the actual disturbance on that from every year will be minimal.
Can you avoid development on the wetlands? Can you put it elsewhere?
So we're pretty limited on available cleared area on this property. We could explore looking elsewhere. However, there's some challenging topography and it would require additional tree clearing, which we tried to minimize. And we would like to maintain the approved size that was approved by National Grid, just to make the project more economical to build.
So in the follow-up for your wetlands, would you also discuss your alternatives? And why they would or would not be feasible for you?
Yes, we could do that. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
So National Grid's telling you the size of this project? It's not what you guys are choosing?
National Grid approved our proposed size, which is the largest that we can propose for a community solar system. To participate in New York State's community solar program, you're limited to 5 megawatts AC, which is what this project currently is sized at.
But you could downsize it.
Yes, but that puts it at risk of potentially not being built if economics are not viable for the project. At a reduced size, reduced revenue, there are other issues beyond just reducing it that may impact the success of the project. I mean, you could, go ahead.
I mean, I guess I'm confused on the size of the project because here the village put one in that's what covers 4 acres, maybe 5 acres at tops. And that was a viable project to be able to do and make work.
So I can't speak to what program they participate in, what their equipment costs were, who that energy is serving, but I can speak to community solar and this particular project. We can, it's not that you can't propose a smaller system, it's that it has a negative effect on the project's ability to succeed and to actually get built and operate. So it's not a matter of that it can't be, it's that what is the impact if we do reduce it? So we're proposing the full size that was approved by National Grid. One of the hardest things to find when siting these arrays beyond a willing landowner is a viable interconnection point. And so this circuit on Mead Road has the ability to take this full capacity of the project. So that's what we've been proposing, and that's what was approved by National Grid. So when I say that, that's what we'd like to get here and what we're counting on for the economics. But as far as the ability to reduce, There's nothing unlawful about reducing the project size. It's just, this is the size that we're proposing.
This is Bob, if I may. I just, as a point of clarification, that the village array at the old drive-in is a municipal system that's to offset municipal usage, and it's not community solar.
Thank you. And the economics for those are widely different than community solar. And at this scale, I would say the interconnection equipment is also much, much different.
Anything else on that topic?
So we're going to,
Number 3, no attempt was made by the applicant to avoid development on prime and prime if drained agricultural land. This land has been and continues to be actively farmed. I beg to differ on that myself, but
when was the last time crops were grown on that?
right.
This summer.
Sure.
The only comment I have on this particular thing from the county planning board is it's not up to us, it's not up to them, it's up to the landowner. We don't get to dictate what they do with their land.
What's it farm does? Is it, are they growing hay? Are they growing?
They change it every year. They alternate the crops to keep the soil proper and keep it usable
Okay,
for future crops.
But he,
Corn, soybean.
so they plant it every year and harvest it every year.
Yes.
This
Grass,
spot.
corn,
Mr.
soybean.
Mr. Brewer is leasing the land, correct, to somebody? Is that
That's our
right?
understanding.
Yes.
So-
We should
Rural bucks.
Andy Hopper for a while.
He must have taken it back this year because he did his own crop work.
So is Andy the one that's putting in the crops, or is it Mr. Brewer that's farming it? I guess it
Well-
really doesn't matter.
Andy Herbert's been leasing it, but I think Brian Brewer took it back this summer because his tractor was in there and he was doing his own.
Okay,
And I'm guessing it's because of this project going on, so.
So as far as whether it's being farmed or not, really isn't our concern.
well,
As far as an allowed use goes, I mean, that's up to the landowner whether they get to, I mean, he's choosing not to farm it and lease it for the solar land. That, I don't have any problem with that. However, I think we talked about the displacement of prime soils in the last meeting. I believe
it
there's,
says right here in our policy, removal of any prime agricultural soil from the subject parcel is prohibited. That's our policy.
yeah, but we're just getting to
Why,
that. We're
why are
getting-
you saying that it's not a
No, no.
problem?
No, I'm saying that not farming it is not a problem or not our concern. If they move the soil, that's our problem, our concern. We haven't got to that
Okay,
part.
I got it.
Right.
Excuse me.
We're just getting there.
All right, go on.
Okay, so Mike, I believe we talked last about probably very little disturbance of soil, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and I would like to say no removal of soil from the site. We're not moving any soil off site.
What does that mean?
We're not taking away any soil of any prime soil.
You're gonna
everything-
leave it as it is, where it is? The current
Well, we're not-
location, or are you gonna push it back so it's all level and make a pile somewhere?
So we have no grading proposed for this project.
Alrighty.
There is some tree disturbance, but that's removal of trees that's not in existing ag land right now.
Okay.
As far as the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we do allow the soil to be moved on the parcel as long as it doesn't leave the parcel.
Yeah, so, and I would also want to say on this comment too, one, this is considered prime farmland by the soil classification. It is not drained to our understanding of talking to Mr. Brewer, so there's no current drain system in there. In addition to that, as part of our NYSERDA application for this project, should it be approved by the town, we would be abiding by the New York State Ag and Markets guidelines for the installation of solar in prime farmland. So there are measures taken to minimize disturbance. By design, our foundation system we selected is one of the most minimal impacts we can offer for a foundation system for one of these arrays. We're not digging up or grading to install the foundations. There'd be a driven pile or a ground screw system, similar to what I presented at the last meeting. So we do take efforts to minimize that.
This was discussed at the county level, and there was a couple of planning board members that were very, very strongly opposed to using prime farmland. And I think this is just the advent of an issue that's probably going to get bigger and bigger in St. Lawrence County, the use of prime farmland.
I know that their comment was there was no attempt made. As I said in the beginning, one of the biggest items for us to make a project is a willing landowner. And we represented an owner that was interested in hosting a solar array, and this is what he desires to use his property for. So that's what we've proposed.
In your site plan, and I don't know if it's there or not, correct me if I'm wrong. Did you include a cross section of any subsurface foundations that will be used for your solar array? And did you also talk in the plan about grading the site and stormwater pollution prevention plan?
So there's no cross-section for the foundation, but we definitely can provide that for sure.
Oh, okay, good.
And then for the grading plan definitely shows that there is no proposed grading in the site. There will be the installation of the gravel road, which basically sits on top of grade. So that's not a disturbance there. And then there is obviously a stormwater pollution prevention plan that accompanies the plans as well.
The pollution prevention plan is already here somewhere?
Yeah, we definitely did send a copy to the.
This book,
Yep.
it's in here. All right, thank you.
That's the big book.
In that, when you do the cross section for the foundations that you're going to use for your solar array, would you all, and you discuss the access road, it needs to be level with the adjacent fields. Would you also include that in your follow-up?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Just want to highlight that with that putting an access road level with an adjacent field, that actually is requiring digging within that. So the alternative to that would be to propose the road fabric over grade and actually build that road up with gravel rather than being level. So I just want to offer that as an alternative that we've done on other sites as well to further minimize disturbance to that soil.
Where would that go again?
That would be for the access road within the array area.
Oh, okay, the one that goes right into the middle.
Correct. And it's also an option for construction of the other road that would need to be extended. But that's definitely a conversation I'd like to continue with Mr. and Mrs. Rose to discuss, if that's acceptable and how the best manner to do that is that works for them.
There is a question on the chat, Mike. Will the stumps be pulled in the cleared areas?
That would be our proposal, yes. Where necessary to facilitate the installation of a solar rack where they could be left cut to grade, that would also be an option for us, and we'd look to do that. But where these solar racks and foundations go, we would prefer to pull those stumps to facilitate the installation of the solar array.
Just for clarification too, for you here at the board, this field kind of starts at our property and it goes kind of uphill from us. And then the lower end, which they're saying is the wetland area. Obviously it's wet because the property drains down that way. That would be another concern of mine, is having these solar panels facing that way, and how, I don't know how the drainage works for stuff like that, but then draining more and creating more wetland from the higher road and these solar panels going into our property. Does that make sense?
With rain, you're talking about rainwater sloping off?
Yes.
onto
Well, yeah,
ground.
because
Where
the
does that-
wetland, I mean,
where
it's
does
a
that go?
field that goes, the field goes this way from, as we're looking at the property, it goes up, kind of, not a big slant, but it's a
Sloping.
slant, it's sloping. The wet area is kind of right behind our property at the beginning of this field and kind of around behind the shop. Because that's kind of where it would naturally drain, obviously. Would there be more of that and raising this road? I mean, and then is it going to start to make our yard the wetland? That would be a concern as well for me.
Were you able to hear all that?
Yes, so I can speak that real quickly, just like in a broad sense. So the way that the DEC, in terms of stormwater pollution prevention. I'm having time saying that today. The way that they view solar arrays is that it's not an increase in stormwater runoff. And the way that you can kind of think about it is that the array, though they occupy a good amount of footprint from looking at them from above, the actual area that they occupy at ground level is very small. And it's basically just attributable to their foundation, to their poles. So any kind of rain that would have fallen on the field if the arrays weren't there will still make it through the panels and then down to ground. These panels have, the racks are basically made up of a variety of panels. Each of the panels, and Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong, have weep holes in them. And so any rain that hits the face of the panels will distribute out to the weep holes, and then they'll fall back down to ground. And then they'll basically just make their way to the low-lying area that you mentioned, the way they would have if the array was not there. And then as one of the measures that's proposed as part of this project, a healthy stand of grass will be maintained for the life of this project, which will actually improve the kind of the drainage potential of the field itself.
Thank you.
There's a couple questions in the chat I'd like to address. We are not proposing pulling stumps within the federal wetland. The federal wetland area we're proposing to use for the project is only a portion of that wetland, and it's already in the cleared area of the property. In addition to that, I do want to highlight that there are foundation pads for the equipment internal to the array, and we've outlined those on the site plan. So those would be the only concrete existing on the site.
And you're going to provide the planning board with a cross-section of that foundation, right?
Yeah, I think that has been provided, but I think we can definitely make sure that that is well detailed for sure. Yes.
Thank you.
And those are located outside of the wetland areas to avoid disturbance in those areas.
Right.
Any
I have
other-
a question? Are they done with the chat questions?
Here's one additional, something about the AC power transformer and 7.2 DC to AC solid static inverter need a foundation.
So I kind of covered that in the last
Oh,
response, but just to highlight that though, that equipment is located on a concrete equipment pad, but we would locate those outside of the wetland area to avoid the fill impact. Those are more internal to the array, and they are shown on our site plan. We'll have to review the intent of the law as far as removing soil prior to pouring concrete or employing gravel. Don't have an immediate response for that, so we'd like to follow up with a response at the next meeting.
Okay.
Unless the board has a thought on the intent of their law as it relates to that.
Well, this is Bob. Thank you. Yeah, I guess you had mentioned that there would be no need to remove topsoil, but if you're going to be pouring a pad in the center of the project to hold the components and then digging down or even putting gravel at grade, you're still going to be compromising the topsoil underneath both of those specific areas. And so it is the intent of the law that any sort of permanent, and I consider concrete a permanent disturbance, that prior to that permanent disturbance, that topsoil would be reclaimed and stored for and when decommissioning might occur, could be put back in place.
So as part of our decommissioning, we would remove the concrete associated with that. Would you feel any differently about precast concrete or pre-manufactured concrete that was brought into site and set rather than poured in place?
I guess it'd be something to be considered, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the intent of the law is that if any prime soil is moved, it can't be removed from the parcel, but it must be then available at decommissioning to put back where it was. So, our decommissioning plan specifies that the property needs to be restored to the state it's in at the start of the project. So at some point, if you move that soil, you'll have to protect it or store it so that it's available 25 years from now.
Well, can't they just replace it? Can they just
Can they
replace
move
it?
it to another part of the parcel and then move it back? I mean, but 25 years later, what happens to a mound of,
Yeah, I mean, can they
it's still on the land. I mean, I guess,
Can they bring in topsoil from another location? That's my question.
Bringing it back to the condition it is now, I guess would allow for that.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, our intent, I guess, in the end is to bring it back to the state it is right now. So whichever way you go with the concrete, I guess, you're gonna be displacing some soil from that specific area, whether it's a pad or poured.
Seems likely, yes. Yeah, at some level, even with gravel overgrade, there'd be some level of soil disturbance there, but we would not be removing it from the site.
This is Bob again, and just maybe to clarify my language, when I said remove, I meant actually relocating so that it is available to reclaim the site when and if a decommissioning might occur. It's not necessarily to remove it, but just not to entomb it and lose it when you go to reclaim those areas.
Okay, understood. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, are there any other comments on that?
Yes, I'd just like to add about the screening. So again, I think it was unfortunate that I'm happy that we got it to the county so quickly. I appreciate the board expediting that for the review, but with that, it was also our first iteration of the plan. So they made some comments on that we already had planned to address. Based on our last discussion with the planning board, we had already started to incorporate some proposed screening from the Roses property. So I would like to share my screen, if that's all right, just to show you what we had in mind to get your initial thoughts.
About the previous.
We'll circle back.
Very good.
Sorry.
Oh,
Do you mind if I share the screen quick?
Yeah.
let me give you access real quick. I think you don't have that yet.
Correct.
You should be able to now.
So this is actually what I wanted to reach out and discuss with you both, but since you're both at the meeting, if you don't mind, I'd like to just get your initial thoughts so we can work that into a revised plan to provide to you for review and discussion. Please keep in mind, this is not our surveyed base map. This is just a tool for our discussion here, basically proposing a line of trees surrounding the parcel line. And we can discuss any offset that may be required from the property line. The intent would be to have these on Mr. Brewer's property as part of our project, but to provide screening from this residential parcel, basically all the way around.
So would you be willing to, as part of that screening, put up trees, bushes, whatever, that are somewhat mature so that they're already screening once they're in the ground?
Yes, I'd like to continue that discussion of what may be acceptable to you or what you may consider mature, but that would be our intent, is to provide something that was had some height to it from day one, but was expected to grow quickly over the following few years.
Yeah, I think that would be a better discussion to have with the Roses, but.
And that's what I'd like to do.
Okay, I just want to clarify for the board's purpose.
What have you used in the past, project for screening?
So in the past, we've used one of the species we like a lot is the northern bayberry bush. It's a shrub. It starts off relatively small, around 3 feet, but it grows up to a foot per year. And in addition to that, we've also used an evergreen, I think something in the blue spruce family, if I'm not mistaken, but we can provide a specification sheet. That plant height is around 6 feet, and it would grow from there.
How tall of a plant would you need to block the view from the Roses property of the project?
We'd have to run some additional analysis on that to, like, as far as a view shed, to understand exactly how high they would have to be before you don't see anything. So you don't mind, I'd like to get back to you on that. I don't have an immediate response on the height. I can tell you that the solar racks will not exceed 12 feet in height. They're generally between 9 and 12.
But they also run uphill.
Yes.
Well, just for our visual, what is the height? Do you have any idea what the height is at the Rose's house and the height at the top of the field? Do you have any idea what the difference is?
I don't at the moment. We can look at the topography and we can certainly include that in any next presentation, but it'd like to be part of a discussion I'd have offline with the Roses as well of what that is.
Would you say that the buffering that would go around the Roses property would replace most of the trees that will be cut?
We'd have to do an additional survey of how many trees are coming out of that area. It would certainly offset, but I don't think it'd be the exact amount. It's likely less.
So you are allowed to plant the trees in the wetlands?
We're not proposing planting trees. There is one section of wetland we need to look at specifically, but right now we're not proposing to plant within the wetlands itself.
Something should have come up with it. And this is on here.
Okay.
My question.
Jim had a question previous to your screen sharing.
Do you think we finished this discussion?
We may circle back to it here.
So I want to just say on that, this is not, that was just a graphical representation of the screening. We will be issuing a revised site plan with the survey information. The road will not be on north to south on the Roses property there. I recognize that even on the right of way, that is still your property. So I can't say it's not going to be not proposed on your property at all, but our intent is to keep it entirely within the right of way and demonstrate that right of way to the town.
Okay, Mr. Rose has a question.
So on your site plan, you're saying that 1 acre of trees you're planning on cutting?
I think it's a little more. I think it's 2. Is that what we noted in the letter, Mike?
The
How
letter
much?
states 2.
Yeah, I think it's about.
I think it says 2.
2
Okay.
acres of existing trees.
I have my concerns that I sent to the county. If I can pass one of those out to everyone.
I'll pass them down, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah. So on the last page, there's a copy of your plans. I don't know, Mike, can you flip that up and show them?
I can only put this in front of the camera and you can tell me if you can see it or not.
Oh, my goodness. I don't think you can.
We're not very high tech tonight. I don't know, does it work better if I hold it this way?
Can you send that? You have this on your phone, so you can.
We can, Jeff, can you get a copy of that to them tomorrow? Of this page at least? Can you scan it and email it to? Yeah. We'll scan and send you a copy of this picture tomorrow, but
So I'm concerned about the outline in your photo or your design that it shows different than what your plan is. And if you take in, I went onto the county web portal, laid this out, and in order to get the 33.75 that you're proposing to do, there's closer to 10 acres of trees that's got to be removed.
Oh,
If you look at this here, this is what I got off the county web portal.
So I just please keep in mind that we haven't had the survey map presented, which is going to be the most accurate information we have available from a field survey. I can't see that graphic that's used there.
I don't think that there's a good way to share
I don't think you
it.
can see it.
You said it's one that they've used before? It's their picture,
This one here,
the top one?
yeah, that was
The
on there.
top one says legal description of premises to memorandum of land lease and solar easement. Does that sound familiar?
It does, and I would also say that that was done at the signing of the land lease without a survey, and it's subject to change within our lease to be filed after survey is completed, after site plan approval. So that image is not accurate or up to date. And actually, now that you say that, I am familiar with that image, and you can see on the furthest point north of our property on our site plan we submitted to the town, that kind of extends all the way along here. I can share my screen again. Sorry, I
Hang on.
can't.
You're okay. I'll fix it.
Thank you for clarifying that. I understand where that image came from now, and I can tell you that it's out of date compared to what we presented to the town. And you're right that in that image, there's more tree clearing proposed than we're actually proposing currently.
So you're gonna be less than 33.75 acres?
Yes, so if you can see on the screen here, basically that, I think the image you're looking at has the array going across the whole way.
Yep.
So you can see we cut out a substantial amount. There's two things that image is based on a superimposed parcel map that's available online over a satellite image. It is not a surveyed base map from a field survey through traditional methods. That's what we collected in the field over the last couple of months. The drawing that was presented to the town currently was from, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, that's from a GIS resource, but it wasn't the exact surveyed information yet from the field survey.
Yes, correct.
So this updated plan will put this in better perspective on the acreage we're using on the parcel. And certainly when you're looking at a satellite image, it'll line up more consistently what we've shown the town in our original submission.
So why is that where that green, I think that base, what you're talking about, the end of the gravel road, that green base you had on the screen just now?
Yep.
But it doesn't have any solar racks around it. Why is that?
The green square, I think that was just my image sharing on here that the panels went away. That's a green equipment pad. That's where the transformer will be located. That's the
Right.
concrete.
Right.
So there wouldn't be any panels on that area.
No, I know on the green, but what about the surrounding area up to the woods? The existing woods right now, you don't have any panels in there. Is there a reason for that?
To minimize tree clearing. Bill, would you be able to speak to the amount of acres of the wetland that are involved?
Not off the top of my head, no.
So you'll provide us with an updated survey or where you
Yes.
plan on putting it.
So
It's not gonna be 30.
The plans will have our latest survey information, including the new boundary, which will more accurately show the Rose's property. We'll also include, all the, area calculations for the removal of trees, and we can add a notation in there for the amount of wetlands that are involved as well, if that's preferred.
Sure, thank you.
I can comment on that, that it's between 4 and 5 acres.
Okay. So in our policy, it says that the removal of trees and other existing vegetation should be minimized or offset with planting elsewhere on the property. I know you did discuss putting in the screening, but did you have plans for putting in additional vegetation elsewhere?
We do not.
If you're looking at a larger amount of vegetation being removed.
We don't have any additional screening or vegetation plantings proposed. We did take an effort to minimize the tree clearing, which is why you see the array it is versus what may have been in that memorandum of lease at the time. So in our perspective, that was our effort to minimize tree clearing. And our offsetting of that is planting some additional trees for screening purposes. We're not proposing any additional vegetation at this time.
Okay, well, look at that when you provide us with the updates. I have another question. That's not related to this.
Sure.
Will you discuss your interconnection cables? Is it going to be above the ground or is it going to be buried transmission lines and interconnect cables?
So we'd like to go underground wherever possible. The interconnection equipment is generally pole mounted, and then the cable would drop underground through the array going to the equipment pads.
In your site plan, does it say how deep you're going to plant these cables?
Not currently, but we can include that in the updated set.
Please, thank you. I think our minimum depth, according to our policies, is 48 inches.
Yeah, we do specify that to the extent possible that everything is underground.
Which is our intent on this project, is to provide as much underground as possible. That's our preference as well.
One of the questions that the Roses have is there any under voltage, over voltage situations that could occur from this that could affect the residents along that string of power line?
I'd like to get back to you with a more detailed response, but in general, the reliability will remain the same as you have now based on National Grid's approval of the project. They perform studies, particularly reliability studies, to ensure that this system has no negative impact to their customers. So you'd still receive the same power you are now, but happy to provide a further response at the next meeting.
Well, some of this is National Grid telling you that their system is capable of handling what you're going to give it, correct?
Yes. Yep. We went through a detailed study with them, particularly looking at reliability and making sure that this was not resulting in a negative impact to their customers. So it's a pretty rigorous screening process that we went through, and this is ultimately what they approved for interconnection, this capacity and this equipment.
How about the setback isn't continuous at the 100-foot all the way around the property? Well, I'm sorry, one side it doesn't have to be, but the other three sides of the property doesn't show the 100-foot setback.
I think it's within our zoning law. We talked about it.
Yeah, 25 feet. It's gonna be 100 feet from a residential neighbor,
Right.
25 feet elsewhere on the property.
So it's 100 feet for them.
It's gonna be 100 feet from, say, the Rose's property. The remainder that doesn't border a residential property is 25 feet.
It goes around them.
Where they would
So-
have to be 100 feet.
Yes,
Yeah,
100
yeah.
each place, yeah.
Into that certification.
So I think you have seen our solar law, so you know that around the Rose's property, the setback is 100 feet.
Yes.
On the opposite side is 25.
Right. And we do show a 100-foot offset around the Rose property and also around the auto body shop too, just for consistency.
Okay. So that addresses the concerns from the county planning board. Obviously, you guys have some homework to do for us. But before you start on all of that, does anybody have any questions or comments to add to this while we have them here?
I've got a little more.
Okay.
I guess I'm concerned and would like to know why all this was presented as just a preliminary when you guys knew that the road was wrong. You need to investigate the right of way, the tree removal, all these things that should have taken account prior to submitting to the town board.
It was a preliminary plan for discussion purposes with the town. We felt that the plan met all the requirements of the town submittals process. We wanted to have a conversation and update that plan for a final approval prior to an approval. This wasn't intended to be the final proposal of the project. It was a starting point for a conversation with the town to see the requirements.
I can speak to that a little bit. That our very first meeting is a preliminary meeting. It's where we fact find, if you will. We had the opportunity after that meeting, which is a little bit abnormal, but we were able to get this right to the county planning board. With the holidays coming up and with COVID getting worse, we took advantage of that opportunity to go to the planning board. So while it seems like we're a little bit of ahead of ourselves, we brought that step in one meeting sooner than we normally would. Although that means nothing procedurally to us. I mean, we still proceed at the pace we need to proceed at. So that from our perspective, that's what happened. More?
Yes. What about the decommissioning? The county had some a big red flag on the money available. Didn't really meet their specs. It seemed pretty low. One of my questions is, what is the hazardous waste in these panels? Can you tell me that?
We can provide you information that on the next meeting. I would say that as far as there's no leaching of materials from these panels at all. So and they would be removed entirely from the site. But as far as getting you any additional information on the actual components involved, I'd like to follow up for you.
One
And the
thing,
board.
the county planning board did not have the benefits of our meeting minutes where a lot of this stuff was discussed. The decommissioning plan that was originally proposed, they knew was not going to be acceptable by the board. So they agreed to change it to the limits of our solar law. So the county planning board would not have seen that because they didn't have our minutes in time, because we had to hurry to get the application to them literally the next day in order to make this last Thursday's meeting, because they require a week ahead of time. So Jeff had to hustle, gave Jenny no time to get the minutes to the county planning board. So they didn't have that. They didn't have that advantage of knowing what we had already discussed.
And in our minutes, we said that the decommissioning plan was going to be amended.
Right.
And it was going to be discussed, at the county planning board and come back to us. So has that been amended?
There's not yet, but our intent would be to amend that with the financial surety outlined in your town solar law. If the minutes say that we're going to discuss that with the county, that did not happen. We generally do not discuss our decommissioning plan with the county. We would handle that at the town level per your solar law.
So you'll just bring it back to this committee when you get that done?
Yep. And that would be revised to be consistent with your solar law, and we would intend to submit that later this week. In that decommissioning plan also outlines the materials involved on the site and the removal of those materials.
Perfect.
How do Jim and I see or get the town's laws for that?
The solar law, the town clerk can give you a copy.
On the website too.
Yeah, it's on the website also.
I probably got a copy right up there that we gave it to KB.
Okay, thank you.
Also in our last minutes, we talked about sending this to the town attorney for feedback. Did we get any feedback from the attorney?
I haven't spoken with them.
You haven't?
No,
He's in our minutes. It said you would, my Markham will connect.
I don't know. We disconnected a couple of times.
So if you could follow up with that. See what he has to say. Maybe wait till we get everything from him.
I don't honestly remember why the town attorney needed to be contacted.
said that he was sent information on the project and you're gonna connect for feedback.
Bob, correct me if I'm wrong. We were gonna just touch base with Eric to make sure that everything was in conformance with our solar law, I believe, but as it's written, a couple of the things that we don't have in place, and that would not be this board's purview, is the fee or pilot, if you will. But I think everything else is laid out fairly correctly.
That's correct, Mike. We have been in touch with, since the last meeting, been in touch with Eric to discuss host community benefit agreements. And we were gonna wait to reach out to the developer until you got through a couple of these first meetings to see that, make sure that we weren't premature, that this was actually a project that had some legs before we actually put too much energy into it. But other than that, yes, you were right on.
Okay, so as far as this project goes and as far as everything that's in front of us, and I see the supervisor is listening in, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's no need for us at this point to contact the attorney for what we have in front of us. Am I correct?
Yeah, correct. I would say it sounds like there's probably another meeting about to get scheduled, so they can come back with more information. And then once you're in a better place with what information you're receiving, I think then it'd be a good time to update the attorney as to where things are at.
Okay, sounds
Yeah.
good.
I'd also like the opportunity to further address at the next meeting the components and the materials involved in the solar array. These do not contain cadmium or chromium. You're thinking of a different type of module. These are silicon modules, monocrystalline silicon modules. So there are other types of modules that contains those elements, and these are not that type. So I'd like the opportunity to present some further information at the next meeting.
Perfect.
Okay, so Jim, Pam, you have anything?
I think I'm good for right now.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to propose, and I'm going to speak for the board, and they're going to slap me if I'm wrong. We're going to set another meeting. In the meantime, you're going to come up with all the answers that we've talked about, correct?
Yes.
You're going to talk to the Roses before we have another meeting.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to do that.
We think we've established the right of way, but we kind of want to see something a little more definite, and with your plans with that. And one thing that I would like to ask is, we will discuss it at the meeting, but could you send us anything ahead of time in writing so we have a little bit of a chance to digest it and not try to be reading and talking? And or you could send it to me and I could get it to the board so that, even a couple days ahead of time, so that we have time to look at it and develop some smart questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mike, I agree. This one obviously was a little bit of a rush, given the county just got the comments back to us end of last week. But we do appreciate you allowing us to address your comments and the Rose's comments in person. That's much appreciated. So with that in mind, what would be your intended date for next meeting, and when would you like to receive the materials by?
I guess it's gonna be up to him, isn't it? When can he get it to us?
So typically,
Friday.
you folks typically have it on I think it was the last Tuesday of the month. Is that correct?
Well, that's our normal meeting date. I think any hope of having this wrapped up by the end of the year has gone out the window now.
I think it's up to him. When can you get the information to us?
Yeah. How quick can you get what we're asking and talk to the Rose? I mean, next week is probably out with Thanksgiving.
Oh, no, I was not intending for next week in terms of a meeting date. We can definitely get you the revised plans very soon. We're actually pretty close to finalizing those. In terms of all the other information, especially the coordination and discussion with the Roses, obviously that will take a little bit of time. And then obviously finding the establishment of the right of way and things of that nature. That is a timeline that we can't quite say right now. We're going to work hard to get that to you as quick as possible. So I mean, we can meet an aggressive timeline if that is amenable to the board.
Would you prefer that we try to do this before the end of the year, or are you not in a rush?
If we can come to an agreeable solution with the Roses and the town, we would prefer to have this wrapped up this year if possible, so we can continue planning for potential spring construction.
And what looks-
So-
One other, I don't know if it'll be a discussion with the Roses, but the buffer plantings, how the elevate, the
And the
view,
elevation.
the height
Right.
of the
Right,
plantings,
but
will that all
that's-
be discussed?
Mhm, you said it will.
We need that information too, I think.
Yeah, whatever you discuss with the Roses, we need to know about also. So if,
And vice
you know,
versa.
after you talk to them, you know, you could summarize maybe and get it to us in writing.
Sure. I'd like to talk to them first and find out, come to some sort of, just discuss the project in general and what proposed screening might be acceptable.
Yeah,
to
it
you.
sounds like, and I've been out to the Roses, but, you know, I standing here or sitting here trying to visualize the project behind them, the sight line and height lines escape me right now. So that's something you need to address with them. You know, if their house is lower than some of the solar arrays, some of those buffers may need to be higher, lower, whatever. I mean, those are things you can discuss with them, and they can speak better than we can. So what are we looking at for a meeting?
Sorry, there was an additional comment in the chat to request MSDS sheets for the material.
For the
So there
material?
are no MSDS sheets available for a solar panel, but we can provide more information regarding the materials.
So we really can't meet until you have a lot of this figured out. So it's up to you when you have it figured out, then we can schedule a meeting when you have this figured out.
Well, I think the majority of this can be delivered to you next week.
Definitely the revised plans can be delivered next week for sure.
Yeah, but you're not gonna know about the status of the right of way next week, are you?
I don't know at that point.
We have a lot of the information. We do need to have, we do need to have some, opinions weighed in on it, but we'll turn that around quickly. Mike, I can defer to you on that and when you think that can be.
I don't have an exact date, but with the exception of that one item, I feel like all the other items can be addressed, and we'd have an update on the other item by next week.
But if they can't clarify road access and whatever and get them on board, then it's moot.
Right, but that gives them a month.
If we were able to address all the concerns at the next meeting, then it would go to a public hearing,
Right?
which would take
Right.
10 days from the meeting to,
Mhm.
so we'd run smack into the holidays.
Right.
So to give everybody enough time to digest this, we probably shouldn't meet until the 15th.
Wednesday,
That Wednesday.
Wednesday's the 15th or Tuesday. the
Tuesday.
4th, Tuesday.
It doesn't matter to me. I don't,
Okay, whatever.
whatever day works. that's-
2 weeks from now would be the 1st. That's too quick, the
Let's
8th.
do it let's go for the
I'm already in
15th.
21.
Okay.
Let's go for that week.
If we shoot for the 15th, we're probably not going to get a public hearing scheduled until like the 5th of January. Would that work?
If that's what's acceptable to the board, we'll make that work.
And Mike, you'd want materials in hand for the meeting. How soon before the meeting do you think?
If you could get it to us like the week before, so that gives you time to get as much as you can rather than
Yes.
piecemeal it to us,
And do you envision that the board would be sending a comment letter addressing a lot of the items that were brought up today?
The board will be sending one?
We could send you the draft minutes.
Yeah, we'll send the minutes to you.
Yeah.
Okay, but
It'll take,
like a
that would
comment
be
letter
next
that,
week. Yeah, it'll be about a week.
okay, but it wouldn't be like a comment letter like listing the items that you expect us to have met, you know, that kind of.
I think if you read Jenny's minutes, they'll all be in there.
Okay, that's fine.
Fill that out
They're
on that
looking for
sheet.
Clarification
Yeah.
sheet is what
She
you
might be able to do a summary sheet for you from the minutes.
of what you're looking for.
Yeah.
I should be able to
Okay.
do that. I've done that before. Action items.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
that would be
I can
great.
do that.
We do appreciate it. Thank you. Just something to reference so we make sure we hit all the items that you're looking for.
Will you share it with us before you send it? to
I
me?
will, absolutely. I always send it to Mike first,
Thank you.
and then he shares it with you guys.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so motion for a meeting on the 15th. This will be another site plan review meeting.
So moved.
Second,
Yes.
all in favor? Okay. Gentlemen, do you have anything else for us before we
The 15th.
close out?
I just wanted to see for Mr. and Mrs. Rose if it's appropriate to reach out to the body shop to contact you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, Pam, anything else?
I think I'm good.
Okay. Board? Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you for your review and the additional comments. We'll be sure to address all of those and get back to you as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bob, you can keep recording, please.
Yes, sir.
Does anybody else have anything?
This is,
Not you.
unless the planning board has anything, if I could just chime in a minute. I guess, they're gonna have some issues still with the right of way, in my opinion, and we'll see where that goes based on what I know. But the problem I'm still having with this, and I think it's really good that we're going through this with a smaller project, because I think we're really gonna learn some of the deficiencies in our law and our language. And something that I've picked up on immediately, if they are in fact true, that they're saying that they have some ability to manipulate wetlands in the way that they're doing, whether they're federal or state, that's a real oversight on our part as a town. That I think we were operating when we wrote the law, that the assumption was federal and state wetlands are protected, and that it would be there'd be zero chance that anybody would be trying to manipulate them in this way. So I'm gonna take that specific piece there back to the board and back to the committee to point out that it's a real oversight. If in fact this project can go through on a federal wetland, and the Army Corps of Engineers are gonna be okay with it, we still have some authority there that if we don't want to see that thing happen in wetlands in the town of Canton, that we might want to rethink about some of the language in our law to address that if in fact it's a loophole. So that's my thought on it. And I've got some homework to do to see if in fact they are accurate on what they can do in a wetland, because anybody who has any land in St. Lawrence County knows you can't put a shovel in the ground near a wetland without the potential pushback from the DEC and the Fed. And so this seems to be way over the top, in my opinion.
Yeah, I wanted to do some research into the Army Corps also. I do believe that the state and the DEC is probably stricter than the federal wetlands. But we don't run into very often something that's federal and not state.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah.
On their thing about the wetlands and their response to it? I have a contact in the Army Corps of Engineers, and I emailed it to her today, and she said what they're saying is perfectly acceptable to the Army Corps of Engineers.
Oh,
So
okay.
just information that I picked up today.
That's the information we wanted to hear.
That's very good information, Jeff. And I guess the question we have to ask ourselves philosophically in the town of Canton, are we okay with it? Because we could set the bar higher than the feds if we choose to in our law. And I guess that's a philosophical question we probably should be having. Thank you.
Well, one of the issues that we're going to face right now, though, is this project is halfway through. We can't change the goalpost. You know, the solar law has to be changed or amended before that can happen. Without some kind of action, probably by the town board, we are obligated to follow through here.
No, I understand. That's why I think I'm going to reach out to our attorney tomorrow and just talk to him about this item. Because again, I think these early projects are going to be an exercise in us learning how we protected ourselves with our language in our law. And this one's jumping out at me as something that we probably didn't have all of the information, I guess.
Well, I think
And that's myself included. I'm not pointing at the planning board for that because I was just as much involved with it as anybody.
Well, no, I think you and Jim and Matilda and I all knew that this wasn't going to be perfect.
Sure.
And It's going to be a work in progress. There may be some amendments that have to be made. My fear is the bigger projects where we don't have any control over. But
True, but I think once the projects get that big, the state authority starts to set in and they're going to take away not just our responsibility, but then our work. And so it's these smaller and mid ones that are going to remain within the purview of the local boards that are going to probably be the ones that we're going to be most engaged in. But I do want to check with Eric to see at this point, if we find a deficiency in our law, what is our right? If in fact we need to update it. So that's a legal question that I'm going to try to get the answer to tomorrow.
okay, yeah, if you could share that with us sooner than later, if he can provide an answer or some guidance. I think that with the amount of projects going on just in the county alone, that we're probably going to run into another one of these at some point in time, sooner than later, because as we all know, the land is cheap here.
I agree. And I guess one last point, because this is really our first salvo at a 25 acre or a 5 meg project in the town. I would not bend over backwards to meeting the developer's timeline, but I would make sure that we're doing this on a timeline that everybody on your board and our board and the neighbors are satisfied with, and that we create the timeline, not them. And
Well, exactly.
so I would say, my words of caution would be to go slow on this first one and don't fast track anything.
I somewhat envision 2 more meetings before we get to a public hearing. But when you're going back to the town board, I would highly urge you to look at what other communities are doing in regards to the fees for these projects. I think we're horrendously low.
Yeah.
And I think there's an opportunity here for the town to get some money up front in the cost or the fee of the project, because you probably aren't going to do well in the pilot end of it.
We are. We're reaching out to there's 4 municipalities in New York State that this company has dealt with, and Eric is reaching out to them individually to see how the project has gone with them and what their host community benefit agreements have looked like. So legal is doing some research on that for us.
Yeah. Besides that, though, I think if you look around locally, you'll find that we're charging far less than we need to be for the
permit.
For the permit.
Yeah, well, that's something I think working with Jeff, if there's recommendations on that, I think January is when those fees are set. So we're pretty close to the timeline of readjusting those fees, especially if you think we should have a specific solar fee.
I think there's probably a rate that we can charge and get away with that is probably acceptable based on what's going on in the area.
Yeah.
And we're low.
Agreed. I'm gonna step back and let you have your meeting. Sorry for saying so much.
That's fine.
Well, the county, at some point in the county planning board meeting, they did recommend that we bring in a third party to review these costs.
To review what?
The costs.
How do we know we're low if we've never done that?
Well, just based on other communities, what they're charging.
Yeah, but if we've never charged for one, how do we know what we're charging?
You said you were just doing the building fees or building permit fee.
Right.
That would be lower than what some other communities are doing.
How do we know that though?
By talking to the other communities. What would the building fee, what would the fee be for this project? I guess is my question.
I can figure that out tomorrow, but I gotta believe that it'd be somewhere in the, let's see, 10, 11,000.
Yeah.
Probably 10, 11,000, 12,000.
I think some municipalities are charging per AC megawatt
Okay.
and charging about that per megawatt.
Really?
So
I
you're
believe you
talking
can
5
Google it.
times that amount.
You can Google and check now.
I think that's worth looking into. That's a discussion for the town board, not this board. We kept that, but always looking out for the town that I am. I just thought that there was an opportunity here to pad the budget for the town. Because there's some costs incurred with all of this that, we don't get back if we don't charge the proper fees, and a building permit fee may not be adequate for a project like this. Because I think regardless of whether the town negotiates the pilot agreement, whether they go through the IDA to do it, and this is a large enough project that, the town is going to reap tons of benefits from on the backside. So the opportunity to get the money on the front side because they want to get this project going that's the time to get your hands in their pockets. And I would think, Jeff, from what I've heard, that, you could probably charge 10,000 per meg. Certainly worth looking into.
I'll find out what I can.
Okay, anybody else?
I would like to make a comment. You're saying that you're always looking out for the town, and I appreciate that. Being a business owner and always in this community, in this school district, we do all we can to support our community and the affiliates with that, fire department, schools, that type of stuff. So this being a new thing for you guys, I feel like there was a real big disconnect with no landowners being contacted we had a hard time finding information. We looked for meetings. We tried to find out information. So that was a little disheartening for me personally, as far as feeling like this was going on in our community with no real public knowledge of it. So I'm hoping that in looking out for the town, you and us being part of our town, that people can help look out for us as well. Because that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah.
You start thinking about this goes through, our property value alone is going to plummet. I hope our taxes plummet with it if it happens. And I honestly don't know if I would want to live there afterward, to be honest with you.
So usually we don't notify neighbors until the public hearing.
We
is that
don't,
right?
yeah, we
'Cause
don't.
This is all preliminary.
What,
very
there
preliminary.
was, and I apologize, there was a disconnect getting the information from me to Jeff, to Jenny, to the town website last time. That has been rectified.
Maybe we do.
In the future, we also will have the Zoom link on the website so that more people will know about that they can link in. I was somewhat surprised that the press wasn't here.
There's not a better way to figure out how the landowners, adjacent landowners could be notified.
Well, legally, the town code specifies how to do that for a public hearing. And
Public hearing.
I don't have the time to reach out to every landowner for every agenda item that we have. I'm sure Jeff doesn't. I happen to know Jim and Pam, so, I've talked to them a couple times about this. But after the fact, because, I didn't know they weren't aware. One of the things that we discovered at the meeting was that they hadn't even approached you. And we discussed that, and it should have been in the minutes, whether it was or not.
Yeah, it is. And in fact, even everything we said about fencing and screening and making sure everything was okay, and we just made an assumption that I can't get
Because
over.
we
Yeah.
did talk about that
Yeah.
before it went to the county.
And part of the the process of getting it to the county, and we were, not our fault, we were in a hurry to get it to them because we literally Jeff had to get the stuff to the county by Friday in order for it to make the meeting last Thursday. They didn't have the advantage of the minutes that, we had already discussed a lot of this stuff previously.
So Mike, can I ask, so what was the urgency at that point to streamline it so quickly to get it to the county?
We didn't know when they would meet again. They have a full meeting once a month. With December coming up, I don't know if they meet in December. We had enough information to give it to them to get their input. One of the reasons that we sent it to the county is that the county planning staff had a large role in creating our solar law. So this was our first test, and I wanted them to see it to make sure, here's what we crafted together. Let's make sure it worked. And so we wanted their eyes on it. We weren't technically obligated to send it to them at all, but a project this size, I just would not have been comfortable not sending it to them. We were trying to work with the developer to meet their timeline. There were some funding issues that come with these projects. So we always try to work with them as much as we can, but the timeline always rests with us. So getting it to them, we felt at the time was important, not knowing when we might have the opportunity to do it again.
I hope for future, and I think Bob had some really good points of it not being on their timeline, it being on your timeline, because this is a learning process, obviously for you guys as well. And we're kind of a little bit of the guinea pig in a way. So I hope that that can be thought about in the future for.
It can be, but you have to understand that their input is part of our process.
I do understand.
So we needed their input before we were going to go any further. I honestly didn't think the developers would want to meet tonight. I thought they were crazy because I didn't think they could come up with answers that quick. They obviously came up with some answers, but not enough.
So, I got a kind of a sour taste for the Chasen Group right now, just for the way they've handled this. I sat with the county. I decided to sit in for the next solar project that they were doing in Oswegatchie. And it was night and day difference. With that developer, they had contacted the fire department. They had talked to the code enforcement office. They talked to every single landowner around them. They had already on their plans, showed where the tree line was going to go. Everything was in. I mean, it made it so easy for the county. And this is kind of like a muddy mess that they throw in a preliminary because they want to get things rolling. And it's just created a whole lot of work for the county and you guys and ourselves to protect ours. I mean,
I agree.
so it's really frustrating, and I'm not sure how my conversation is going to go with them, but
And we're not blaming any of you. We realize this. I'm glad that we came tonight because we realize that this is new for you as well.
We're glad you're here too.
And I appreciate
I mean, I certainly feel for you. I wouldn't want a big black field next to me.
would you want that wrapped around your house?
And with, and when you talk about buffers with them, they didn't know. They were talking 3-foot tall trees at first.
Yeah,
It's not going to cut it.
some shrubs.
So even just to be the height of, even if we're just sitting on the first ground level, 3 foot and then a foot a year after that, it's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
Right.
And then
you have
it's
a
going uphill on
and you
top
have
of
a
that.
2-story house, and you're, so there's got to, you're gonna, that's a tall tree that you're have to have.
So I think the right of way is the first thing, and
Yep.
their discussion with us obviously are two of the
And then
primary things.
what
that
is the
need to happen.
definition of ingress and egress? What is the
Right.
use for that?
But you got to think at the end of the day, if this thing goes through, the Roses will be living next to an industrial zone.
Bob, are you still there?
And,
Yes, sir.
I went out there.
When you talk to Eric, would you ask him a question about right of ways and just what the meaning of ingress and egress is? And is there a broader interpretation of that?
Sure. Yeah, and again, I think I mentioned this last month. I think it's a super complicated right of way because I think Cornell Cooperative, or not Cornell Cooperative Extension, but New York State has their fingers in on that deeding as well. And I think that even if the developer somehow gets the Roses to come along with this, I think they still have a third party in New York State that's going to have to make some concessions, and I think that is going to get next to impossible, but we'll see. But I will ask Eric those questions.
They may
Okay,
need to
thank
look
you.
too, because it's not only our property they're crossing Cornell as well.
Right.
Right, so they knew them,
They know that.
Nobles.
they knew that from our last meeting.
This is right up.
They never listed. This is only a farmland. They never listed.
Did you do that?
Because the Roses aren't
The
farmed.
farmland, I know.
But in some ways, it's better for us to jump into a hard one than an easy one.
Yeah,
We
definitely.
answer more questions or raise more questions, I guess, than we would if we had an easy one. Anything else? Jeff, anything on the horizon?
Not that I know of right now. Well, I know that they're doing some kind of wetland survey out by Nickerson Road right now. They're delineating it. I ran into them today, and the way these developers look at it is they find infrastructure that's already existing that is not taking its maximum
Right.
capacity, and they're utilizing these areas to up that to the maximum
Right.
capacity.
And that's why.
And that way they
picked
delete having had new infrastructure, so it's cheaper for them.
Right,
And they want to put in the maximum they can to bring that line up to as much voltage as what it'll handle.
yeah, there's a threshold there where it's financially feasible for them, and probably around here, a 5 meg is as low as anybody could go. Now, community is different than commercial. A commercial 5 meg is probably not feasible anyway. But I wouldn't be surprised if, you got 3 or 4 before
Oh,
spring.
they've
hit.
already, people have already called me and asked me about different places, and they were wondering about it. And I said that the solar law wasn't done at that point, but if this company is looking at these places up here, there's other companies looking at them too. And
Well,
there's
they
2 or
must,
3 of them.
it's my understanding that Mr. Brewer approached these people, not the other way around.
And that's what the company
Yeah.
indicated.
That's
Yeah,
what they,
Last
yeah.
time.
so,
Mr. Brewer.
he had an intent for that property, I think, in the last year or
Well-
two. Not that it makes a difference to us, but
My neighbor Guy Berard, he's been approached by several companies. He said he gets emails, mailings,
Yeah.
phone calls. He said some companies have been from China, he swears, that they're just, you can see everything on Google Earth,
yeah.
or the county web portal, and zoom in on everybody's property, and they can pre-plan a whole lot,
Oh,
That's why
yeah,
they get a phone
I'm
call.
sure it's going both ways.
Yeah.
Is there any other solar farms being proposed in the village or the town of Canton? Besides the 11?
Not,
11 and this one? I heard something about Nickerson Road.
yeah,
Well, he
he
just
just said
said-
that.
Oh, that's what you're talking about, but
They were
nothing.
delineating a wetland out there today. I stopped. Of course, they won't tell me why they're doing it. But it is a farm place, and I know that there is a transmission line out there that is substantially under what it can carry.
So on the Mitchell farm, they're looking? On the right side of the road?
It's, the Mitchell farm, I think, is up further. This
Yeah.
wetland was
Oh,
on
okay.
somebody else's property.
Well, we saw some interest last month from that,
County Route 14.
out of County Route 14,
Yeah,
although I don't think that
that's
project's going anywhere, but.
No, because they
He had no
lacked-
clue
they lacked
last week. He had
infrastructure
no
to hook
clue.
into.
But there's-
That's where they're
That's the
lacking.
key.
But it shows there's interest out there.
Mary Ann asked a question. Does anyone know how much the developer is paying to lease the land? I did note that at the last meeting,
I
we
thought-
didn't have that information.
I thought it was like, I heard it was around 900.
We are not privy to that information, and the developer is certainly not going to share it unless the landowner shares it. We won't know.
A friend of mine that's not in the village or the town of Canton is being, he's being kind of asked if he wants to give up some of his farmland And he said it's anywhere between $900 an acre to $1,250.
That's a lot more than what a farmer's paying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
So,
that's what it is for him, and I don't, and
so any farmer,
Dollars.
it's dollars.
And the ag.
And they're
protection board
struggling.
is very concerned.
Figure $1,000 an acre roughly for your answer.
I heard, there was a company approached a guy and offered me $200.
Yeah.
So that's big money.
It's big money for farmers.
And-
From what I've been able to gather on the larger project, for utility scale, for a landowner to lease 100 acres, it's $75,000 for every 100 acres in the lease
A year?
per year, while it's under production. And it gradually gets to there once they actually start to run the juice. It's lower until they actually get it online. And then, but once it's online, for every year it's online, it's 75,000 per 100 acres of panels.
Think about that.
It's a nice,
a lot of money
that's a
for
nice retirement
Almost
income.
everybody, right?
Well,
The Hubers make it.
I think
And-
that's certainly what he's thinking about.
and think about that, that's probably cheaper than they pay elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it's big money here. Certainly a motivator. Anybody have anything else?
How's it going, Mike?
And again, thank you for coming.
Thank
you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for coming.
So you know when the next meeting is, it'll be the same format in person. I presume it'll be in person and Zoom, depending on what happens with COVID. It may be a total Zoom meeting.
what did you say? How late was it?
The 15th at 6:30. We didn't set a time at 6:30, Johnny. We'll take a motion to
So
adjourn
moved.
and we'll take a second and we'll take an all in favor.
Second.
Who did second?
All right.
Okay.
Bob, thank you very much.